To do a video on genetics, on DNA information in DNA. I wanted to put it to task based on the laws of information theory, information science, and show that when you apply the laws cross-disciplinary to it from information science, you realize that evolution and the random argument actually fails. And we know from information science and laws of information science, I've got some qualifications in that area, that those laws hold up under all circumstances, and that actual evolution, the random argument, actually fails when you apply the laws. So we want to put that to task. Now, there are a lot of scientists who have done this, and I recognized it as a real issue, but there's been scientists way years and years and years who have been working on this and have written books on it. And these guys are pointing out the most obvious some of the most obvious fundamental flaws to the actual materialistic paradigm and naturalism that has been dominating science. Now, this book here, and this got author, I'm trying to get it right, Warner Gert, PhD, he's written some great books, and they are straight up just demolishing when you understand what actually information is in actual science. Information itself is a non-entity, material entity. So when you try and say material answers for a non-material entity, you're going down the wrong path straight away. And if science is binding itself bound by saying only we'll accept material answers, then it is actually not getting the right answers. If they, for instance, information is a non-material entity, then how can they get answers for that? What actually has to happen logically is the science world has to adopt and realize you have to move from materialism, naturalism arguments, to information arguments, because information theory is the dominating theory of the world at the moment, and information science and laws are dictating that no, information comes first and it is material second. So materialism, which has had a stranglehold for 150 years, with Darwinism, materialistic answers, are actually not doing science a favor at all. It should be information first, materialistic answers second. So they actually will complement and progress science. I believe science is actually, by using the random argument, they're doing exactly what they accuse the creationists of doing. God of the gaps. Oh, God did it. And not seeking the answers is what they're accusing creationists. But really, the reality is they're the ones saying random, but they cannot account for information which actually has to come first. So they have to change. The paradigm of having random spread like it's a mantra is over. Information theory, information science, the laws of information science will dominate science. I believe there's going to have to be a massive paradigm shift in the scientific world, and they're going to have to come to this conclusion, which the engineering sciences have already come to. It's just the slow naturalistic sciences have been teaching materialistic answers. Okay. Anyway, why did science develop in the first place from Judeo-Christian countries? Because the scientists, the people living in those Judeo-Christian countries, believed in a God that made an orderly universe. Therefore, they believed in order of creation, and it must be able to be discoverable. So they started studying this creation and looking for order, looking for these principles that we call gravity and things like that. Now, that was the scientists. All the great scientists were actually creationists. They're all young earthers, and they all. Why did science stagnate in the other countries? Because they didn't have an order. They had no orderliness to it. They had no paradigm to start with. So it started with creationists. It started with Christian scientists seeking out and trying to find the mind and the thoughts of God by studying His works, and they believed it was discoverable. And in fact, they believed it was a mandate. And I'm going to do a video on that, about the fine-tuning of the universe and how that points to a designer. But anyway, as science is only having materialistic random answers and saying random, and they the guy from Cosmos, is he accused the creationists, the fathers of science, founders, that they actually were using God of the gaps. Oh God, how glorious, and the glory of God, whenever they got to a point where they couldn't progress. But he didn't actually think that maybe God was actually allowing them to be discovered in the first place. That the actual foundations of intelligibility actually only come from a Christian worldview. He wasn't saying that they were actually opening up science to be discovered for people to discover it. God was actually opening these guys up and allowing them to discover it. He didn't give any of the credit to that. Their Christian walk was what made them great scientists. Instead, he somehow turned it on its head, saying they weren't great scientists because of that, what was holding them back. But science was not held back at all by that. It was actually founded by those premises. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all the great universities were founded by Christianity. They were founded on that basis. Now, I believe science has been going backwards for 150 years. I believe it's lost its roots. I believe it's going in the wrong direction. It's been looking for only materialistic answers, when really design answers might have been would have furthered science instead. Anyway, let's have a look at some of the let's put genetics, naturalism answers and materialistic answers to task using the laws found in information theory. Okay, let's just clarify very carefully. Information it has purpose and a code always comes from intelligence. Okay, that is information law. That when we see information, we know it only comes from an intelligent mind. Therefore, when we analyze the nucleotide, the base pairs, ATCG letters, we can see a code that has been forming in the DNA. Now it's stored in a material entity, a material substance. You know, sugar phosphate backbone, the nucleotides. It's all hydrogen bonding. They're all material, but they are not the actual information. The information itself is separate. This can be clearly demonstrated by analogy of magnetic letters being put on a fridge. If you get the letters of the alphabet, and you get a fridge and they're all have magnets on them, you could argue, like a materialistic, naturalistic answer, that there is a reason for using natural laws why these letters can bond to the fridge. Okay, because there is a reason. Now, just like we could argue that the nucleotide, the base pairs, have bonded to the sugar phosphate backbone. There is a chemical reason that can happen. So we can argue that using only materialistic answers there. But what you can't do is argue where information can come from when them letters are all arranged in a orderly, not in order, because nature can produce order, but we're talking about intelligence, not order. So we're saying, what happens if them letters on the fridge wrote the first chapter of a Shakespeare play? Now, there might be a chemical naturalistic reason why they can magnetically bond to the fridge, but there is absolutely no materialistic, naturalistic answer why they actually show information. Now, that is the problem. Materialism can only go so far. The random argument doesn't work. It gets beyond the probabilities of just rational reasoning. The rational mind will realize straight away that if they looked at them letters on the fridge, that they would know they were not put there in that order, showing maybe the first chapter of Genesis written out with the letters. A rational mind would read them and go, yeah, that's not random. It's obviously intelligence ordered them on that fridge. Now, we can do that we can do that and we can say, yeah, that's obvious. But when we look at DNA and we use the same argument, we can say, yeah, there is a naturalistic, maybe, chemical reason why they can bond in the first place, yeah? But there is absolutely no rationalistic, materialistic answer for them to form information in DNA. That means that it has to come from intelligence, because that is the rational reasoning that we would use in any other scenario in that case. So the whole random argument is actually absolute folly when you understand that information is not a material entity. And if you have not really studied, I'm guessing most natural scientists have not studied information theory, and they do not have a clue about this, and so therefore they're really ignorant. I've debated with many scientists, like face to face, and I'm talking very recently on this, and they are different, chemists and different people, physics, you name it, but they have no understanding of information laws or theory. They are outside of that loop, and so they have never actually ever thought of it through that lens. And so you really need to read a book if you have not really got understanding of the idea of how information and where it comes from, and you don't know those laws. Remember, they are laws. They're not just a theory. Like evolution is only at the status of a theory, but these laws are at a law. They're at a level above theory. They're absolutely unbroken laws, irrefutable. And when you apply them, the argument of information with all the regulatory things in DNA, you realize the stupidity and folly of believing and using the random card, which I believe is exactly like using the God of the Gaps card. I believe random is actually a silly mechanism to put forward. Now, I've got a book from one of him, William Dembski, double doctorate mathematics philosophy, ID person actually. Remember, I'm not an ID person, but I am totally in favor of their arguments because they are proving intelligence, but they're not trying to prove any God or anything. They're just saying intelligence. But he's done a lot of work in this area, and he's been studying it, and he found the probabilities. Is there actually things that are random can't actually do? Is it impossible to a point where random answers are actually not just improbable but impossible? And he worked out that if you get the supposed age of the universe, say we could go 20 billion years, we could just go beyond even what most natural sciences believe, but if we go 20 billion years, then we go for every known atom, say 10 to the power of 80, and then we go for how many events can happen in a single second, and that's something like negative 47, 10 to the negative 47 or something. So we get all those. So for every known event that could possibly happen in every second of the known universe, with every atom being calculated and recombined, every atom, every event that could possibly happen for the known age of the universe, then you can realize that is the outer limit of statistical random charts. Anything beyond that is, it cannot happen. It's not only improbable, but it's impossible. And when you do the protein chain, when you look at DNA and you use that understanding, you realize it's not just improbable anymore, it's impossible. The peptide bonding of a normal protein chain, we have to get the 20 out of the 200, the proteins. You only got to get a certain left to right-handed one, and you start going through all the probabilities. And how many do you have to make? You've got to make 100,000 protein chains. But just one goes beyond the probability of it happening in sequence of every atom changing in every time splice or event that can happen all of known time. That means 100,000. They can't even do it for one. Okay, so the the statistics are against it happening in the first place, randomly from chemical evolution. But the actual paradigm of information comes before the material has to make you go, I see. It's impossible. Information is formed first, not the material. It can be stored in any material, but information is outside of the material argument. Okay. Anyway, let's have a look at some of these genetic things that we see. Like evolution is trying to say, yeah, everyone believes in variation. Let's look at the two things. Creationist ID or creationist, whatever you want to. I'll just use creationist because I'm a creationist. I believe in the God of the Bible did it. I believe that's the only worldview that shows the laws, the prerequisites for intelligibility. That is the only world that actually logically can actually facilitate those things. And when you run the logic against the actual atheist worldview, it actually fails at a mathematical logical level. And actually the Christian worldview is the only one that stands up. Now, if you don't understand that argument, because the origins debate was I believe already won by this man here. I believe astrophysicist Jason Lyle, Dr. Jason Lyle, has already settled using the ultimate proof argument about origins debate, and that's based on the laws of intangibility being formed by the worldviews. And I think it's already been settled. I think it's just the fact is people haven't actually studied it, don't realize that yet. But let's actually just allow you to live in your ignorance for a second, and we'll carry on. If information is a non-material entity, as the laws of information science say it is, and is found, we then find information in DNA, then that clearly points to intelligence forming that DNA. But let's just give you guys the benefit of the doubt that the impossible happens. Maybe you believe in aliens put it there. You're still believing in intelligence, and then you've still got to go one step back. How did they form? You're still in the same paradigm shift. Panspermia. How did the information get on the meteor? Aliens. How did the information get in the aliens? It's still one step back to realizing a creator God. You're just foolishly deluding yourself by putting it one step back each time. Okay, it always comes to a non-material answer, that there must be a God who's not part of this creation that has put intelligence into the creation itself. That is the only logical paradigm to go to if you think through the argument. But anyway, let's just give you, because you seriously have already lost anyway, just from studying the genetic entropy in the cell by the inventor of the gene gun, Dr. Stanford. He's already defeated evolution already. He's already done it. Just his work alone is enough to put nail in the coffin. I mean, you guys are a dying breed. You're a dying. There's nothing that can save your paradigm. I'll tell you that now. There's nothing. There's not a new evidence, a new fossil, nothing. You can't save your paradigm. It is all of science fields are turning against you. Anyway, but let's give you the miraculous. You've got the information somehow, in the cell, and then maybe it's a small cell, small simple creature, whatever. But you're saying evolution happened. Your actual idea, evolution, actually happened. That it can somehow create from one creature all the creatures on the planet by variation, mutation, natural selection, driving it. Okay. Now let's analyze that. I believe that is folly again. I believe that's folly. Anyway, what we have in all the creatures, we have genes, and there's two genes. They have a pair, and at any position, or it's called locus or loci, the genes can be heterogeneous. That means they can be different, or different forms, and the name is alleles. Alleles. I'm not very good with the name. Anyway, of genes, and they can maybe, but one of them could code for blue eyes, one of them could code for brown eyes. Okay. the alleles, the differences can be one of the genes can be dominant, one could be recessive, or they could be combined. When they put together, they create a different type of combination. Okay, and it's a lot more complicated than that in genetics. Just giving you a little bit of a framework. Anyway, there are 35,000 genes come from your mother and your father. 3 billion base pairs. We're talking about big numbers. Humans have average differences between the alleles of 6.7. Okay, there's the average of every human has these differences in their genes. They have about 6.7. That means 67 in every 1,000 genes will be different. That means in 3 billion base pairs, that's 2,345 heterogeneous loci, positions of genes that can be different. What does that mean? This means if you have a single human and with 2,345, that's just based on the average, of different types of genes that can actually have different choices in the DNA. That means you can have one human or two humans can produce to the power of 2,345 different combinations. This is combinatorics permutation theory. Everyone in mathematics and knows all this stuff. Anyway, that means that's 10 to the power of 706. That's a lot of different combinations. Now, when you think about it, if the atoms in the known universe is 10 to the power of 80, 10 to the power of 706 is from one human with that many combinations. You have an amazing amount of variety there. Okay, so that is just based on the average. So that means that can easily explain all varieties in populations in humans easily. It's not like we've even come close to the limit of different varieties of how people can look and height, eye color, everything. We're not even close to that. Okay, but there does seem to be a body shape that impedes mutational changes, etc., like how we can alter that. Now, when mutations actually are, which I believe are actually, all they are is actually corruption of information, existing information, either in insertion or deletion or a copying error. All those things are not helping the information at all. They're just corrupting existing information. I believe that's actually where the evidence goes. How do we get speciation then? Speciation can occur by things like genetic drift. That means random sampling that lose genetic information can happen if you, say you put it's called the founder effect. Speciation caused by geographical isolation. It's called allopatric. Anyway, what happens is the little creatures, they go, and there's only two of them on an island, and they're away from their colony, and they have a genetic mutation in it, and that causes all the rest to look different on that island. And everyone goes, oh, evolution. No, creationists believe in variation within a species. And they believe in mutations happening to information. Evolutionists believe in variation within a species and natural selection. So we have creationists believe in variation with natural selection driving, evolution believing in variation with natural selection driving, and well, they're both believing in variation, they're both believing in mutations. So what is the difference and the point of difference between evolutionists and creationists? Or I'm talking intelligent design theorists. What is the difference? The point of difference? The point of difference is information from a creationist is already an existing entity. It is already there, and the mutations are acting on the existing information. And natural selection can only select what is viewable in nature that has actually come out, and is only can select and drive, is only a driving force for what is selectable from nature's point of view. Whereas if you so it's really, that's very obvious to see. You can look around for scientific examples of that. That's obvious. Dogs, for instance, it's very obvious. I'm going to put a picture up here on it. So dogs are going to do that. Is the variation with natural selection driving it with mutational changes, but always a downhill progression if that's occurring. But evolutionists are saying variation with mutations and natural selection, but one is a reshuffling of existing information or a corruption of information, that's creation. But evolution is actually saying information has to increase. So variations, they believe in variation, mutations, etc. But for it to actually be the mechanism to work, it has to be increasing and creating information. Whereas creationists are saying, no, the information already exists. So one is coming from an existence of creation of information, and one is coming for variation has to create information. Now, the problem is all examples that are cited by evolution are always existing, pre-existing alleles, genes or genetics or information. Like bacteria resistance, which just means it's a population change. The existing allele or recessive gene was already currently there and is actually just being repressed, but when maybe some outside agent kills off the dominant one and the recessive gene actually now comes to light, it has already been currently there all along. It's not like new information, it's actually just population change. It's always about reshuffling. Variation is always about reshuffling or a decrease in information by mutational or reshuffling. Okay, mutations that destroy existing information, that's what they are. So there is a change like bacteria resistance to penicillin. It's a good one. By disabling the bacteria's mechanism that inhibits the penicillinase, low amounts are normally produced by bacteria, but by disabling that mechanism that makes only little amounts, that regulates that, then the mutation allows the bacteria to produce more of it, which makes them resistant to penicillin. See, the information was currently there to make it, and it was being regulated by a functionality. When that functionality was actually corrupted by the mutation, like the on-off switch to say when to stop producing this, the regulatory gene was corrupted by mutation, which means the existing information was corrupted by a mutation. Then the actual benefit was it's now bacterial resistant. Now that's still not going to help in a genetic level, because which bacteria was actually is the best survival of the fittest. Yeah, there'll be a population change for when penicillin kills off all those who haven't got that mutation. Sure, there's a population change. But if there are any other, if you reintroduce that bacteria that has the mutation back into the popular world, the one that's got no regulation is going to be using up far more resources than it needs, and actually is going to be outdone by survival of the fittest. Natural selection will select for the one that has not got the mutation in the end. It's only when penicillin changes the population. And again, that's the whole argument. The information is being corrupted by mutations, and you're only seeing a population change. We see that in Darwin's beaks, finches, beaks, and all that sort of stuff. It's only oscillations between the beaks. Every example given by evolutionists saying this is evolution is actually only that. It's never a driving force. It's never variation increasing information. And this is I believe it's like smoke and mirrors. It's like whether evolutionists are aware of this, they're ignorant and they just don't realize it, I don't know. But I can't believe they're all idiots. I have to think they're actually being deceptive and actually lying to the public. I have to believe they can't be idiots. They must be being deceptive. That must be the reason why they are conning people, because you can't use these things, these examples of variation, to say we're going to extrapolate those examples to prove the theory of common descent actually occurred. You can't extrapolate when it comes back to information. Information is either increasing or it's not. And I think clearly observable science is saying no, it's decreasing. It is being mutated, it's decreasing. Regulations, existing information is always there before the material entity. So therefore there has to be a non-material answer to this. And hence we believe it is intelligence, and that intelligence is the creator found in the Bible. Sharing genetic information between bacteria. Now, this one's been proposed. This is a good one. Plasmids. And there's another one, another name. There's plasmids and another name. I mean, they're really neat ones. Read this one if you're censored biology. Suppressed evidence. I mean, it's a great book. This one here, pretty much in the first 3 chapters, pretty much destroys most of evolution's silly arguments by just using the evidence available right now. Okay, sharing genetic information between bacteria is not increasing information itself. The information has to exist in some bacteria, but just by sharing it and saying, oh, we're going to use a symbiotic mechanism for evolution to happen. No, you can't do that. You've still got a problem with information, and how has the information formed? Where has it come from? If it's in some bacteria and they can share it using plasmids, that does not say where it came from. You cannot. Evolution has no mechanism for the creation or invention of information to begin with. Sure, it can say we can copy that information from one bacteria to the other. Yeah, sure, you could use that, but you're still at the problem of where did the information come from originally, and there is where you're at the dilemma of you have to believe in the random, and the random, again, as you know, goes beyond the statistical chances of it happening. So you are always stuck at every curve. You guys are looking for the fossil evidence, the in between, 150 years of looking for the different intermediates. They've found 99% of all the living animals as fossils. They don't think there is not going to be any intermediates found. That's the thing. God created all the animals, put information in their genes. They have now been, with all the alleles, or different combinations, they have been breeding and making variations on this planet ever since they were created. That is what's happened. We see it as like an orchard of trees, and they've got massive branches coming off them. That is what the Cambrian explosion shows. That is what the evidence points to. I believe it is utter folly that evolution actually still is a scientific argument, because there's just nothing going for it. And I think information is going to seal the deal. I'm hoping eventually that the sanity will prevail, and that information can get back on track where it started. The scientists can get back on track and realize that design is actually the best answer for some of these problems, and that when they start looking at germs and biology using design, they're going to find far more breakthroughs, realizing the different paradigm of mind, that these things weren't accidental, they were designed. So if they were designed, what was their purpose? And if there's been a mutation or corruption, what has that done to the original design? I believe far more breakthroughs in science are going to happen instead of looking at it from a random occurrence to begin with. I believe the random thing has been the most stumbling block of science and scientists. For 150 years now, the science has been going down the wrong path, and it is not. It could be far more developed than it is right now. Yeah. So anyway, that's where I'm at. The different arguments.